Well, my son is my adopted son.
Mm-hmm.
I married his dad 3 years ago, and Josiah's biological mother passed away when he was just 2. And as a single dad, my husband raised him, for 5 years on his own, but no one ever really paid attention too much to what was going on with him. Developmentally, there was a lot going on at the time. And as I got to know Josiah more and more, started to realize that even though I had never had children of my own, that there were some things that might not be developing quite right. So started to question them and perform some research on the symptoms that I was seeing.
What were those symptoms?
Well, there were social inability, lack of integrating in with other kids, tremendous shyness, and some what I perceive to be as somewhat not typical behavior in the sense of concerns about textures and annoyances with certain sounds and lights and things like that. He had fears that, for me, my only level of reference was what I knew as a child growing up, and just thinking, I wouldn't be afraid to go step on grass, and he had kind of some issues about going on the grass even with his shoes on. So certain things just didn't seem quite typical to me as a kid. At the time he was 7. And so the more I started looking into it, I spoke with the school. We live in Boxford, Massachusetts, and raised the question about it. He did have an IEP. They were living in New Hampshire before we got married, and he did have an IEP that came down from that school. So the more we started looking into it, they asked if they could test him. And the testing came back from the school psychologist that he was functioning in the lower 1 percentile for his age. Here I was looking at this 10-year-old boy going through behavioral stages of, a 4-year-old or 5-year-old, because actually one of the tests that they took at Braince Balance showed us that in some areas his brain age development was at 4 or 5 years old. The things that we started seeing was his behavior was changing. He had a lot of what is termed as echolalia and stims, where his hands would flap, or he'd repeat things over and over and over and over again. That started to diminish. He was stopping a lot of that. His whole countenance had really came into a place of peace. His IQ test changed. His IQ scores had gone up from just 2 years before when they were taken. And academically, he was now functioning in the 85 percentile from being in less than 1%. So academically, we saw a huge change in him. Josiah is back in the same elementary school that he was in when he left in grade 3, and is in the 5th grade now. And he's doing amazingly well. The special ed group that was working with him before, we've met with them, and they said that the changes in him are exponential. Overall, the experience was amazing. It's, again, something that you can't count the cost or the time, because it's so miraculous what it does with these kids. And would I recommend it? Absolutely. Everywhere I go. My husband and I do a lot of public speaking, and everywhere we go throughout the United States, we share the story of what has happened in our family